AskReddit by ArcKnight40. Wedding photographers of Reddit, what was your "they're not gonna last long" moment? I'm a videographer and the groom called me a couple days after the wedding. He wanted me to make sure I didn't include any footage of him checking out the women at the wedding. Lol. So how much of the footage did you have to exclude? Surely you became ultra aware of it when he said that. I've photographed a few weddings, but this comes from a time my friend bought his girlfriend a ring for Christmas. It was obviously an engagement ring, but she claimed it was just a Christmas gift. My friend agreed. We all knew he was lying. A year later they become engaged. She insists on a location wedding. She wants to fly off and get married on a tropical island. My friend profusely apologizes to me, tells me he wanted me as a best man, but she wants her best friend's husband as the best man. I don't go to the wedding. The bachelor party took place after their honeymoon. We were all drinking and having a good time. He tells me that the ring from Christmas was his first engagement ring to her, but it wasn't good enough. She was just a showy girl and needed a bigger rock. He spent twice as much on the second ring. It's been 3 years since that bachelor party. They have been divorced for a year. She's now pregnant by a man as old as her father. I bet sugar daddy has plenty of cash. No joke. I recognized the groom from a Grindr. I presume that means he at least included a face pic. If not, I have at least 14 other questions. Wedding was on a golf course. Bride had a vision she wanted of her husband driving up on a golf cart to see her for a first look. He got one look at her from the top of the hill and vaulted the cart, ran down the hill, picked her up and twirled her around to tell her how gorgeous she was. We caught it all. It was the best first look ever. Once he set her down, she straightened herself and looked back to us. Okay, I don't want that. Let's do the golf cart now, and she sent him back up. Wow, just wow, I can't imagine being that much of a control freak. Like damn, the wait for him to go and come back must have awkward. Deleted. I know 2 people who had a wedding of convenience. He's gay, she's a lesbian. Their parents are Chinese, immigrants to the USA on one side, still in China on the other. They have a marriage that makes their parents happy, they're really good friends, roommates, and they do what they want on the side. It works, but the logistics must be intense. Bride looked visibly miserable the entire ceremony. While photographing the men's getting ready portion, the groom repeatedly kept joking about killing himself. During the toast, the bride ran off to the bathroom for about 30 minutes and came back wiping her tears with her eyes red and puffy. Neither of them had any chemistry at all. It made no sense why they were together to me. That was the last wedding I shot. Was it an arranged marriage? Deleted. I was a bridesmaid in a wedding where the bridal couple left the reception and as if on cue all the bridesmaids started ugly crying. We'd all tried to talk the bride out of going through with marrying the demeaning, insecure pose and couldn't hold back any longer. The bride's family came over to see what was wrong and just sadly nodded at us. It's been 35 years and they are still locked in the most emotionally abusive relationship I've ever seen. So much potential happiness wasted. Good to know you were at my parents' wedding. Best man's speech made the groom out to be a gold digger. He wasn't entirely wrong, tbh. And this guy was the groom's best friend. When the groom engraved "fuck you" on the bride's ring. In another life, I worked catering shifts loads of Saturday weddings. I'll never forget the best man's toast to the groom. It was a shameless roast. He spoke openly about the groom's willingness to shag anything when he's drunk. He then went on and on about the groom's deadly gambling habit and his short fuse when he doesn't win. He asked the stone-faced groom, how many thousands of dollars in golf clubs have you destroyed or lost in countless ponds? Nobody was laughing. The bride had tears in her eyes and the groom's parents sat in stunned silence. Hope he warned the bride of all this before the wedding too. One of those hotel venues that can run 2 weddings at the same time. Bride from our wedding is found in a hotel room with the groomsmen from the other wedding doing coke before the first dance. End result was we got paid and told no need to edit or deliver pics. Safe to say it didn't last the night. Were they just doing coke together or did they transact other businesses as well? Went to a wedding during college to my friends that got married who graduated 2 years prior to me. They had a beautiful wedding on a boat off the Keys, and as the best man gave his speech, he was really drunk by this point, just shouted out, "You don't deserve her, you literally got a blowjob from a stripper, no make that 2 strippers at your bachelor party. Peace out." He dropped the mic and tried to do a dramatic exit, but by this point we were all stuck on this boat in the middle of the ocean. It took an hour to get back to port and it was the most awful and awkward hour of our lives for everyone on that boat. Do go on. The engagement session. The couple was in from out of town because she had just taken the bar exam to become a lawyer. At the end of the session, I gave them a prompt to share with each other what they were proud of each other for. He couldn't think of a single thing. Somehow they still got married, complete with the groom drinking 11 IPAs plus several shots before the ceremony, mother of the bride so drunk for family photos she pretended to strip, and the groom and all the groomsmen wearing camo hats with neon orange letters that said titties and beer for the entire wedding day. Including sunset couples photos where he refused to do anything I suggested, nearly spat chew right on my feet, kept farting on purpose, and loudly complained about how all he wanted was to go have sex. Guy sounds like an animal, goddamn. Said this before. Third wedding and the best man, the groom's brother, starts his speech. "Well, welcome back everyone. Good to see some new faces and some old ones." At his third wedding, my uncle's best man started his speech with, "I told you buying my suit would be cheaper than renting." He got his third divorce after about 6 months. Which to be honest was longer than we expected because we all saw it coming like the steamroller security guard from Austin Powers. Deleted. Ooh, finally one of these I can contribute to. My mother was a wedding photographer till I was about 18-19 and I helped out on many of them. The one that stands out the most was when we were at a campsite where both the wedding and reception were being held. About halfway through the reception I hear the groom start laughing maniacally. I peeked over his way and could see 2 groomsmen hauling the thrashing and screaming bride towards the lake. They threw her into the freezing cold water with her veil and dress still on. When she got out of the water I genuinely thought she might shoot somebody. Saying she looked like a drowned rat would have been an insult to rats. Her hair and makeup and probably the dress were ruined beyond repair. The fact that the groom laughed and didn't do anything stuck with me as being a dogshit move even as a teen. Apparently she thought so too because they didn't even make it 6 months. That's one of the most horrible wedding stories I have ever heard in my life. Not just because they threw her in the lake, but also because depending on the weight of the dress, the cuts of fabric, and the depth of the lake, she could have easily drowned. I think my first clue was when the bride showed up with some bad makeup clearly trying to cover her black eye, while most of the rest of the family seemed far more into the free food and booze than the wedding itself. Oh yeah, never paid me either. Classy people. Yikes. Any idea if she ever got out of that marriage? Wedding photographer from India here. 1. Bride's mom does non-stop about the groom to a couple of our photographers. She believed that her daughter is too beautiful for the guy they promised her hand to and how she'd rather have him die sooner than seeing him with her daughter post the wedding. 2. Bride and the groom had the first dinner separately because the bride wasn't just in the mood to have their reception dinner together. 3. This is the final nail in the coffin post the wedding. When we were about to photograph portraits of the couple, the groom walked up to us saying that he's too tired from the wedding, so it'd be better if we could use the photos from the previous weddings we shot and morph his face onto those, and walked away. They divorced 3 months later. P. Holy shit, that last one, that is bonkers. One of the bridesmaids cried the entire time from makeup till reception. Would have nothing to do with the groom. Kept wanting photos of just her and the bride. 8 months later, bride and groom are separated and she up and elopes with the bridesmaid. Okay, way off topic, but I just noticed your username. I'm assuming you're from the St. Louis area, and if you are, this story just made a hell of a lot more sense. When I worked as a wedding planner for a hotel chain, the groom had found out his bride was having an affair with her brother's best mate. The bride's mother knew about it, but insisted on the wedding and paid a fortune. The groom wasn't drinking much and at the speeches, stood up and revealed he knew and said he was getting an annulment. He then took his best man on his honeymoon. The honeymoon the bride's parents had paid for. It's not gay if you make the ex-mother-in-law pay. At the rehearsal dinner, every toast to the bride was some euphemistic variation of "I'm so glad you finally found someone to put up with your bullshit." They barely made it to the 6-month mark. I don't know why I found that so funny. I'm imagining they ranged from subtle jabs to like her brother just flat out saying it. Over coffee, at our initial "do they want to hire me" meeting. They argued bitterly the entire time, and eventually, the groom just sat back in his chair with his arms crossed and wouldn't speak to either of us. I went home and the next day, emailed them the old something suddenly came up and that my schedule had unfortunately changed. Red flags aren't just for the people in the relationship. Vendors, see them and heed them. Yup. I took a job, desperately to pay rent, from a couple like this. They sent a letter saying they were going to sue because we didn't take enough photos, even though we didn't know ourselves how many photos we took. Anyway, I gave them the digital copies, but not the edited physical albums, and they shut up. I later heard they actually sued the reception venue because there was a fire in the kitchen in a separate building, ruining their special day. Not sure how successful that was. There was a lot more, but at the wedding, the groom did cocaine and called bride's father a cocksucker in front of her friends. They didn't last a full year. I met with potential clients to go over the details of the wedding and to see if we would be a good fit to work together. I tried to schedule something at a cafe, but they insisted on me coming to their house. When I arrived, there was a 5-gallon Home Depot bucket of dirty diapers on the front porch. I had a feeling this wasn't going to go well. A young kid, probably 7 or so, answered the door. All I could see and hear were children running around everywhere. The soon-to-be husband was sitting on his bed that was in the living room watching TV, and the bride was in the kitchen with 2 kids on either hip. She told me to sit at the kitchen table to go over the wedding details. She shouted at her fiancé to come and join the meeting, where he didn't acknowledge that I was there to talk about shooting their wedding. The bride was annoyed, then asked if I saw the bucket full of dirty diapers on the porch. I said that I had, and she said her fiancé has so many kids with other women that is the only place to keep tea. I did not take the job. I always wondered what happened to that couple. We are doing fine and have 2 buckets now. Asked the groom in a recorded interview why he asked her to marry him, and he said, the pressure to get married. They lasted less than 2 months. Hadn't even finished the video and they were over. Early in my career I filmed wedding videos. The interviews always give it away. By the end of the wedding I usually have a pretty good idea of who's going to last and who won't, and it's proved out over the years. The groom didn't want to put on his suit to take portraits, even after the bride insisted, because it's uncomfortable and hot. Different wedding, saw the groom down an entire bottle of wine in one go when he finally had a minute to himself. I took the picture thinking it was just going to be a goofy moment, until later on while I was editing pictures, I realized what I was seeing. Oh wait, another one. The bride was 30 minutes late. When I was in the room with the bride while she was getting ready, she told bridesmaids how her sister drove her all around town because she couldn't make up her mind about if she really wanted to get married. RLCOHOLISM. I'm not a photographer, but I used to work with a wedding cake baker staging and setting up. It was always a bad sign whenever I saw the groom smash the cake into the bride's face during the first bite when she didn't. If they both did it, my boss never said anything, but if he did it to her and she hadn't done it to him at all, she would say it wouldn't work out. She had a pretty good track record. When the groom told the bride she couldn't have cake because she was overweight. Lasted a year. He gained weight. Her 3 kids from a previous marriage, 8, 9, and 12, were screaming their asses off and covering themselves in soda and overturning tables while making extremely hostile, profanity-laden demands for a drivable Hot Wheels car, and escalated to just randomly hitting people with baseball bats. Whole time mom was going, haha, aren't they so crazy? Oh, it's okay, they just get to express themselves, we unschool. Lasted, a fake, somewhere between 4 and 5 months. What the fuck is unschool? Edit. Oh. I looked it up. It's just neglect. At the rehearsal, the groom refused to sit next to the bride and insisted on sitting next to his female best friend. The priest said, "Don't you want to sit next to your soon-to-be wife?" kind of chuckling like the groom had just not gotten around to sitting next to her yet. He says, "I have the rest of my life to sit next to her." The gasp from both sides of the family was audible. Everyone was horrified. He did not move. Bride spent the rehearsal dinner crying in the bathroom. They still went through the wedding the next day, which was in October. She kicked him out and filed for divorce and annulment, Catholic, by that December. When cutting the cake, she playfully got some on his face. He proceeded to grab a giant chunk and punch her in the face with it, several times hard. She was digging it out from underneath her eyelids, bawling, and her dad needed to be held back. Edit. A lot of people have been asking, so here is a bit more backstory. My guess as to why people were holding the dad back was that the groom was in full marine dress uniform and they used his sword to cut the cake. That sword was very much in arm's reach of the groom after this happened, so everyone was probably worried something really bad could happen if those two got near each other. After the incident, it was really awkwardly silent as the groom apologized to the family, and if I remember correctly, this was 10 years ago or so. Him and the dad went outside for around 20 minutes, then came back in. The rest of the reception went normally after that. I observed a similar scenario. Wasn't so much punching, but obviously too hard to be cute. One guest said, "You're going to give her a black eye." He responded, first of many, which was preceded by a deafening silence. They are divorced. When the maid of honor tells the story of when the bride had sex in a Burger King bathroom with someone that wasn't her now husband. They broke the sink, then you see the groom start tearing up. We found out later that the groom ended up paying for the damage to the sink and the bride made up some BS story. GAHT damn. Wedding band, not photographer, but I'd say the one where the groom was caught shagging a bridesmaid during the reception. Honorable mention to the one where the groom and his new brother-in-law's funny play fighting very suddenly stopped being funny. Not a photographer, but I worked at the fairly high-end venue for the reception dinner and the new husband refused the meal. Chicken Wellington, baked potato, and didn't want the kids' meal, chicken strips and fries, and was throwing a tantrum about it when suddenly one of his buddies burst into the dining area triumphantly carrying a Wendy's bag and his friends all hooted and hollered. I looked over and the newlywed wife was sitting alone at the nicely made head table in her beautiful dress with a 1,000-yard stare. I've been an actual wedding family photographer in my hometown for 15 years and legit never had a wedding where I picked something going wrong. Sure, some couples have shown their true colors after the big day, but no big indicators at the wedding. Running into old couples with new partners in the grocery store or wherever is super awkward, but the kicker was an old bride asking to remove the photos of her and her ex from my website because he was about to be jailed for arson and she didn't want to be linked to him. Yikes. Not a photographer, but I attended a wedding where the best man, the groom's father, gave a speech about how we don't agree but, insert groom's name here, will make his own decisions. Turns out the bride had cheated just a few days prior, The father knew about it. Groom wasn't faithful either. Both are horrid people and I am so glad we cut them out of our lives shortly after their wedding. Groom said to me before the first look, "Thank God it's not so hot today. If it was, I'm gonna call this wedding off. I love her but I don't want to sweat." Wedding happened, and 4 years later, I happened to book the bride's sister from that wedding and she told me that they are divorced and that he is a jerk and cheater on her. If the groom's grandmother nearly choking to death at dinner wasn't foreshadowing enough, the bride cursing out the groom's entire family at the after party certainly was. They lasted a few years, surprisingly. Not quite the same, but I photographed an elopement in Costa Rica that just didn't make sense. When I was editing the images, I saw him looking at her belly the whole time. Not quite the same, but I pointed out to my GF at the time that her mother, a mild drinker, seemed to be avoiding alcohol at her own wedding. "Maybe she's just pacing herself," she said. Afterwards, she stood up to announce it. When I was paid, but they never bothered to pick up the content. First dance, I still haven't found what I'm looking for, by U2. My dad did wedding photos for many years. He said once while she was taking photos, the wife's boob slipped out and he accidentally got a photo. Of course he deleted it, but the husband was super bothered by it and even yelled at the wife for it, kept like interrogating my dad about it, and was generally weirdly paranoid about it. This happens a lot. I bartended a ton of wedding receptions and have seen a vast amount of bridal boobs. I blame the dresses, most of them sacrifice function for form. It's like those videos you see of wrapping rubber bands around watermelons. Eventually, they're gonna burst. Some people laughed it off and everyone was chill about it. One of the bridal parties actually had an ip-slip betting pool, and as soon as it happened while the bride was giving a toast and leaned over to take something off the table, the whole bridal party stood up and started cheering with one of the groomsmen, the clear winner, whooping. That was a really fun one. But yeah, a couple times it happened and the energy of whole room changed. Like you could feel the bride's anxiety, like she didn't wanna be left alone with him, and the husband's anger. I have the reverse cut on this one. The photographers for our engagement photos and wedding were miserable toward one another. They owned a photography company together and were mostly okay and normal for our engagement shoot. COVID hit and we had to delay our wedding, and by the time we got married they had a baby who was a few months old. They were super nasty to each other at our wedding and neither seemed like they wanted to be there. Found out via Facebook that he left her and the baby a few months after our wedding. Oh, I know this one. When the groom was angry talking about the photos we were going to get, and then at the engagement shoot couldn't be bothered to hug the bride to be or smile for any of the pictures. Edit. Thank you all for your stories. I've had relationships where I've missed signs too. People like this guy are tough to identify in relationships, but of course there are. Not a photographer, but a former priest here. I saw my fair share of ceremonies, rehearsals, rehearsal dinners and receptions. Anytime there was a disproportionate amount of struggle over stupid minutiae in the ceremony from the family or couple, it didn't last long. Anytime the rehearsal dinner was an awkward pile of cringe-worthy toasts, it didn't last long. Anytime the wedding reception felt like a high school freshman dance with the various genders having near separate celebrations, it didn't last long. Fun fact. I did enjoy taking multiple shots with blowhard groomsmen who were impressed that a priest had a somewhat seasoned liver. When you tell the bride they make a beautiful couple and she's like, yeah, he will do. For a first husband, anyways. Haha, never found it funny and always thought it was such a shitty way to start out a convo about your forever mate. I'm not a photographer. I am a full-time, professional wedding officiant. I don't keep tabs on the success rate of my couples, but I do cringe on the inside when the vows are a whole bunch of passive-aggressive punches at each other. Or a reference to how the bride or groom spends most of their time drunk. Or a bunch of, I know you hate it when but you are stuck with me now, Marriage doesn't mean the surrender of one person's personal boundaries. Then you have the couples where they both secretly talk shit about the other person. Not in a fun way, either. I'd say this behavior isn't regular, but it's not uncommon. Maybe 10-15% of my couples secretly, or not so, hate one another. Do you ever say, you know what? I'm not going to marry you too. I wash my hands of this. Bride stabbed groom's mom. I'm a wedding videographer, but my moment is when the bride constantly made everything about the photos. During the first dance, and this is the moment I had a feeling this was more about the wedding than the marriage. The bride was never focused on her groom. The groom was being so careful and loving with her, smiling all the way while she made sure to stop dancing with him every 5 seconds to reposition them to always be facing the camera. She would stop the most intimate moments to always remind him where the camera was and to always look at that camera. I felt so bad for him from the moment they shared their first look too, cause she just kept forcing him to tell her how pretty she looked and to make sure that he cried when she actually walked down the aisle.